This is it, the final episode of our Led Zeppelin series, The Pod Remains the Cast. And in commemoration of it, Ben, I decided I was going to buy a ticket to see Robert Plant in November.
I love it, man. I was excited when I got that text today. It was like also kind of caught off guard. Like
I was too.
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
I mean, literally, I was on Instagram, and this is that targeted advertising they do, which is often junk based on the last Google search or whatever. But this one was Robert Plant, U.S. pre-sale, and I check, and there's 2 Chicago dates, one which would work with my work schedule, and it's a random Wednesday at a 1,600-seat theater.
Yeah.
So I will see Robert Plant. I figure he's 78, doesn't look it, doesn't sound it, and yeah, it just serendipity that it happened to be on the day that we were wrapping up our 8-episode run on Led Zeppelin. Quite the way to start.
No doubt, yeah. And a kind of crazy way to end a not only album saga that we're on, but like a last couple weeks. Obviously, our release lineup doesn't really coincide with our personal reality, but we're coming off Deer Creek weekend.
Still slap happy.
39th birthday weekend. Whole lot going on this July, dude. I mean, I think everybody always says it, and as you get older, you quickly forget about what last July looked like, and you're just in the present. But as I get older, I'm saying, God, like could use some rain, that type of thing. It's like, what a busy July, what a busy August, and it's like, I mean, we're fitting time into like every single Friday, Saturday, Sunday that we possibly can. However, when you have a weekend like the last one, where top to bottom there's not a dull moment, and you're waking up Monday morning trying to perform like a normal human being while also reflecting on everything that just happened over the past 72 hours, no matter how you ever slice it. I remember being a kid, and I actually had time to fall into the melancholic sadness that came from a great weekend like that.
Can't do that anymore.
With a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a job that starts first thing Monday morning, I almost prefer it because we're driving home from Indy, and there was never a moment where I was like the typical, the blues hit because you're coming off just such a fantastic weekend. So I think there's some give and take. But all that said, yeah, today glancing down at my phone and seeing that you're heading to see the Robert Plant in person is just a cool way to put a bow on this whole thing. So I'm super excited about tonight. And of note, obviously, just our normal grading system that we're going to give out was interesting. I kind of surprised myself per usual with this one.
With this album that we're about to talk about.
Specifically, yeah. More importantly, for the journey that we're going to take for listeners after that is ranking every album, top to bottom.
Correct.
Also, sheesh. I think as I texted you earlier, it was a little easier than I anticipated, but also, again, surprised myself because I use this analogy a lot, but gun to my head, I don't think I would have taken the critical time to sit here and do what I did, but I'm pretty proud of those rankings.
Yeah.
And to cap it off, looking back at my historical Spicy Biscuit and Dustiest Crumpet for each album, left a whole lot of great songs out, obviously, because we're not doing like second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth.
You know, one thing that I would have done in retrospect is when we didn't agree on a Spiciest Biscuit, we came to a consensus on it. And maybe we can do that exercise as we're going through that today. Because as much as this album is interesting, I think we'll probably spend a little less time on the album and compared to previous episodes, so we can get into the like Led Zeppelin cumulative wrap up the series sort of thing. But I figure we could try that exercise, and not only the spiciest of spicy biscuits, we will crown, or whatever trophy would be awarded to the worst song, the dustiest of all Dusty Crumpets in their discography.
I love it. And also, looking at them, to me, there is no argument at what the end-all be-all Spiciest Biscuit is. So we'll get there. But
I have been waffling.
It's cool to see because I'm like, you know what, man? When you see it just on 7 albums and then 2 little songs, one's the Dustiest Crumpet, one's Spiciest Biscuit, I was like, there's literally no competition on this page.
No.
That's my thought. So we'll get there. But
and I'll say this: their Dustiest Crumpets are at worst interesting. So when I award one, I would still listen to it and enjoy it. So I think we started off by taking a big bite out of the apple with Led Zeppelin, and it'll be interesting as we go into future series. Now, quick question, should we go ahead and let the listening audience know what the next venture will be?
Uh, let's no pun intended stew on that for
Okay.
a minute. We'll see if it naturally comes out this episode. With some storytelling and what's to come here in the next couple weeks for you and I. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But I think to really quickly button up our last point with our ranking systems, this also occurred to me as I was going through this exercise, is that we have gotten a lot of great feedback on Reddit. So, like, shout out to the Reddit users that are listening and also just kind of doing their own ranking systems and also chiming in on what they're not happy about from our perspectives, as any internet platform would do.
Yes.
I think, though, going through this ranking system is going to allow us to sort of appease to the people that have been like, how in God's name did you guys not give more respect to the crunge? Or, and I think that this will be the opportunity where we're like, you guys realize, even this album tonight, there are 7 tracks to choose from. So it's very likely that tracks 2 through 6 are great in some respect. Some are not great, but there's an impossibility in saying that we can't place them in certain places. So I will love the fact that when we get to the Dustiest Crumpet, it comes with some description on where the others kind of stand in my eyes.
It's sort of, if not ranking, it's saying this is why ultimately I think this is the weakest of the weak. And it's only relative to their discography. I mean, every band has filler tracks. I think Zeppelin's are, on the whole, more interesting. It'll be hard for me to predict what your Dustiest of Crumpets will be. And mine, I felt a little bit disappointed by, but I asked myself, what song am I least excited to hear? And I had to go that direction with Zeppelin because most of them I would be at least, yay, this Zeppelin song, even if it's the 7th best track on an album. Speaking of 7, there's only 7 on the album we're about to talk about, which, just like Presence, is short on track listing, though long on length because a lot of the songs on it are longer. In Through the Outdoor is what we're going to focus this last episode on. We were going to do Coda, Ben, but we talked about it, and I think made the right decision. It's sort of an odds and sods collection, and while the deluxe edition has gems like Hey, Hey, What Can I Do?, the bulk of it was songs that were left off of In Through the Outdoor, and we can briefly talk about those today, and if they would have been a better fit. If you were to, in one word, describe this album, though, what would be the first word that comes to mind with In Through the Outdoor?
It would be impossible for me not to ruin my alternative title in giving you that answer.
Okay, fair.
So let me try to do it in a different way. Huber's. Like, have you ever had a bad time at Huber's? And for listeners, that's a quaint champagne bar in a, what is it, Northwest
Champaign, in a residential area, got grandfathered in, yeah.
I have a great time with this album. So, like, top to bottom, it's 42 minutes. Mike, 9 times out of 10, if you're popping over to Huber's, if we're hopping over to Huber's, it's like between the end of the day and something else. Unless, of course, we extend the night like we sometimes do. Huber's is typically like a truly pop in, pop out, do drop in type of situation where it allows you just a quick break from reality and very low expectations, but low lulls. And for 42 minutes of this album, like, amongst the others that had some really deep tracks that are thought-provoking, this one to me more is like a super easygoing listener that gives the essence of Huber's. Like,
now, question: would you say that the album cover wasn't what it was, though?
It's hard to say, and that's also a great point. But I think so because the feelings that I get from it. I try not to take any album cover at face value for the most part. So it adds to that revelation of Huber's to an extent. I think it more so just like puts an exclamation point on my feelings about it. But I just listen to it as if we're in the back room at Huber's and there's a band playing up front and we're enjoying the jams they're throwing out, but we're not like hanging on every note. And that's to me kind of what this album is. Like I'm not staring at the band in awe. I'm just sort of enjoying every listen that I'm picking up between conversations and things like that. So
Yeah, it is enjoyable, and it's not boring by any stretch, and by no means is it one of my favorite Zeppelin albums. I think you might actually hold it in higher, based on your description, maybe a little bit higher regard than I do, because I think that there are a few things they could have done or tracks they could have put on instead that would have made this a much more lively album. But yet, as it stands, whatever kind of melancholy is part of the songs, understandable given what happened to Robert and what was really going on with two of the band members with their drug and alcohol problems. You know, I still, as I was doing earlier this week, mowing the yard, listening to In Through the Outdoor, yeah, it can be a passive listen. And sometimes that's okay. And this one, from a very young age, this was the first cassette my dad and I bought, along with Led Zeppelin 4, talk about polar opposites in terms of where many regard them in Zeppelin's discography. And yet, we played Stairway, and then he immediately took out that cassette, put it in Through the Outdoor so we could find Fool in the Rain. And I was like, I like that song too. And not everything needs to be some profound musical statement. This album, between Fool in the Rain and Hot Dog and Southbound Saurez, is sometimes goofy, but kind of fun in a way.
Yeah. I think about something you told me while we were camping, and this is better part of 4 to 5 years ago now. Maybe not quite that long. It was our second trip to Clemens. So
it's during COVID, right?
4 years. That was the first one. The second one was Keith and Craig, and
probably 4 years ago. Yeah.
But we're sitting around underneath the canopy, a little rainy morning, but we're already starting to get after it. And I don't know what track I put on for you. And you looked at me and you said, Ben, I've known you for a long time. Something that I've now noticed is that you gravitate towards songs with a particular production. Do you remember saying that to me?
Yeah. Would this have been when you were playing maybe Steve Winwood from the 80s?
Something like that. So
Bruce Hornsby.
Yes. And I say that because I think this album is obviously 79, but it's teetering into that heavy 80s production. And I think, honestly, they were ahead of their time in terms of a lot of the songs on this album for where it was transitioning to into the 80s, but while not quite getting there. They still had every ounce of Zeppelin. But I can't pretend like that also didn't influence me at the core. Like, you got to be honest with yourself, and you're like, what are the other reasons that I'm enjoying this album so much? And it's because it is starting to pick up that full sense of what the 80s encompassed with a lot of the similar bands. Like, I'm sure a lot of Clapton that drove and drives you nuts. Like, it's in the way that you move.
The adult contemporary stuff.
I don't know what it is, dude, but that shit just, like, hell yeah, roll the windows down and give me all of that.
So you Change the World with Babyface.
Not gonna lie, dude. Those were moments for me.
Okay.
That song's impactful.
It's not a bad song.
Not a bad song, but no, like 3-piece suit, maybe a little loose. Dire Straits, like electric guitars. You know, they're still pulling in heavy 70s vibes while also giving you, the cocaine 80s. Like,
what? You mentioned Dire Straits. I'm thinking the song that sticks out in that vein isn't the two big hits for Money for Nothing. It's So Far Away, which you know that song, right? It's so far away from me, and it's got that kind of chill, laid back vibe. But it's got the 80s production. Yes, yeah. What I like about this album, though, production wise, is it still doesn't have the 80s drums. The drums are crisp. Yeah, so it's kind of a cool mix of that 80s, the more synthetic piano sound that you're about to get. And the bass is, strong as ever with John Paul Jones. But the drums are still very much Bonham. It's not at all gated reverb like you'd get with Phil Collins. It's not electronic drum set. I don't think Bonham would have ever subscribed to something like that. And because Jimmy's taken such a back seat, it is kind of like more along the lines of a Bruce Hornsby album than it would be Led Zeppelin 1 or 2. And keep in mind, this is just... It depends on your perspective of time. Is it only 10 years removed from Led Zeppelin 1, or is it, holy shit, we are a full decade removed from it? For as fast as these guys lived, Come to think of it, I guess 10 years is almost like 3 decades for normal people.
Yeah, it's the same perspective that you have when you become a parent. Like, there were plenty of days where, my wife and I would, by choice, sleep in until 11:30 if we could choose to on a Saturday, and then wake up at, get out of bed at noon, get moving, and we were potentially at a happy hour by 5 or 6 and back home in bed by like 8 or 9. That was a total of 6 living hours in a Saturday. Now you wake up at 6:30, you go until 10:30, probably at the earliest during the week, and on the weekends you're extending time past the kids' bedtime. So you're living 3 times as much in a day that you were when you were younger. I have the same feeling about what these guys were doing on tour. It's like they went from living the lives they were living, studio artists, John Paul Jones doing the gigs for hire when he could, and probably doing a little bit of partying, a little bit of discovery. But like when they went on tour, man, it was the gloves were off. It was go time, and they were living. Kind of have the analogy about Sully's Saloon in Louisville, Kentucky, which you visited. It's like, man, we had a joke that was for every year that you worked at Sully's, it was 3 years of your life. So I feel the same way about Zeppelin. So if you take that into account, they really more were at the 30-year mark, I think, by the time they hit this album than 10.
And just the fact, Robert and John Bonham, I think, were 30 when they did this. I think Bonham died at 31. But regardless, it's not like they were our age. We're pushing 40 here. So it's like to think that this album is the mature Zeppelin, and yet the singer and the drummer had just turned 30, and Jimmy and John Paul maybe 34 or 35. I know they're a little bit older. They aren't old. And there are parts of this album that does sound like an old band. I will say, for as enjoyable as it can be, a discussion that I want to have, and we'll do this probably as we're talking about the tracks. If this were a sign of where Zeppelin were to continue, is that a good thing or a not so good thing? Actually, let's just briefly talk about that now because I don't want to forget about it.
No, and I have a question here for you specifically, so this is perfect timing. I noticed that. I noticed their exact age, and I think about us. Like, we're at 39 right now. I'm at 39, and if this was our career, like if we were career musicians, and we technically hung it up as a band almost 10 years ago now, you look at two streets, you're like, what would we have done in the meantime? Like, what genius of us collectively does not exist in the ether because we did hang it up? On the flip side, you can hear and see in this specific album, Into the Outdoor, where they were trending and where other artists around them were trending. I know we still love the Stones and we love a lot of what they did through the 80s and the 90s, and I guess are still doing in some respect. But you wonder what direction they would have taken, especially with what was going on in this album. And it was really peculiar, and I'll let you go because I do want to hear your take, is that seeing that Bonham and Jimmy took a quote unquote back seat on this album was shocking to me when I looked at that, because mind you, I was going through my grading system in my head as I'm listening, and I'm thinking, God damn, Jimmy is ripping on this fucking album, and not to take it away from him, but the fact that he was probably as hands off on this album as he has been amongst them all was pretty interesting. So I don't know, man. To answer your question in short, I am a full believer that if Kurt Cobain was still alive and Nirvana kept on, if Zeppelin went past this year mark for their career, it's hard not to say, despite them just being around to play live music for you from a selfish perspective, as a group, as the original group, that it would have leveled up. I think that this is a band that did what they did and did it when they had to.
Yes.
And anything past this mark, there would have been a lot of filler moving forward in a lot of the albums. And they were as dialed in as ever on almost every album. And even like we said, the Dustiest, Crumpets, the filler songs are, by some accord, great songs to most. So you don't get that often.
No, I think that this was a sign that this band was not long. They did have a tour planned in America in 1980. Didn't get to it because John Bonham died after a short European tour. So let's say they continue in the 80s. They might have another album or two, but I'll go back to Richard Cole, the tour manager's biography. He was in prison because, I mean, he was a not very above board fellow, but he was in prison for something when John Bonham died. And when he heard from a cellmate that a Led Zeppelin, someone from your band, Richard, they died, he assumed Jimmy had died because of heroin. I think that as Zeppelin continues, Jimmy eventually ODs on heroin, eventually. Some bands, as you said, Nirvana being a great example. I can't imagine Kurt Cobain as a 50-year-old. Now, I think sometimes we over-romanticize that idea of a rock star dying young. Like that's, I idolize a Mick and a Keith because they didn't die young, you know, more than I do a Jimi Hendrix because he died young. That just is something that, I mean, Jimi Hendrix is another example. Actually, you know what? I think Jimmy is the rare example of someone that died young where I'd say, God damn it, I bet Jimmy would have turned into quite the just kind of like tour all the time. You know, he'd be at every music festival. This guy that is just like the guitar emeritus of rock and roll. I think he could have done it. But for Led Zeppelin, no. And I don't like the direction I think they would have went in.
Yeah, and we'll move on after this, but it's too good not to share. You know, last night I was telling you that I chose a couple movies to watch while I was getting tattooed, and they both had a similar theme. Totally complete opposite movies, but Point Break, the original Point Break, was one, and the second was Lords of Dogtown. Have you ever seen Lords of Dogtown?
We watched it back in the day, I think. You have the DVD.
Yeah, Stacy Peralta, he was a pro skater back in the day. He was on the Zephyr team.
Yeah, that's right.
But he wrote and produced it as like a story of, you know, them. Well, there's a pro skater, world champion, Tony Alva, still alive to this day, in mid 60s now, upper 60s, but he still skates, pools. He hit a massive lull where he was an addict. He was, you know, chasing the sun at every moment. And you poll these guys, you interview them, and none of them, like Tony Hawk asked him questions that, man, if you thought we'd be skating still at 60 when we were like 13, what would you say? And he's like, I didn't have any expectations living to 60. And that's not to be like dark. It's just, I wasn't looking at life that way. And I think a lot of these guys have a similar aspect, and just there's a quote in Point Break, which is why I brought that up too, where there's a guy, one of the guys in the crew, the bank robber crew, that's like, I'm not going to live past 30. Like, and I think there's certain guys out there, certain rock stars who, you know, some will deal perfectly with quote unquote hanging it up and then doing career life after the fact, either with totally within what they were doing and milking that, or going a completely different route. I would say Robert Plant has gone a completely different route.
Yeah, I think he would have anyway. I think he would have.
Yeah, absolutely. He wants to be a normal human being as much as possible while still being the guy. But I also think there's people like you said, Kurt Cobain, who probably had no expectations whatsoever. Lane Staley. I mean, there's a million of them out there. Mark Lanigan definitely didn't think he was going to make it past 25, you know, and he outlasted most of them all. So you just think about that and the beauty behind a blink of somebody or something or a band. And this is the act of it, because you go back and you daydream about all the what ifs. And I think that is part of the total package too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to make
about it. So
I want to also differentiate too, where I don't think I would ever point to any individual and say, oh, well, I know this. I wouldn't point to any individual and say, it's probably a good thing they died young.
Oh, absolutely.
But my larger point was, I think that certain bands, and you mentioned Nirvana as a great example, I think even Zeppelin, who were a little bit closer to a band that could have had, they had more longevity than Nirvana, but were they like the next Rolling Stones that could have went for 40, 50 years and aged nicely into that? I don't necessarily think so. They were very much of a time. They were so unique to what was going on, and that muse runs out at a certain point. And I think that whatever kind of crackling energy that they had in those early days that produced this insane run of albums early on, and still some inspired moments on Presence and Through the Outdoor, it was waning. And I don't feel confident in saying that, man, after a 1980 tour in North America, they would have been energized. And like Jimmy Page said, we wanted to make a guitar-heavy rock album. Well, if that means an album full of In the Evenings, which has some cool stuff, I think eventually there's a law of diminishing returns with that. And you aren't getting primo Led Zeppelin. You're getting albums along the lines of like the Rolling Stones' Dirty Work, which is a hunk of shit. And they were able to outlast that and just say, you know what? We tour. Our albums are merely an excuse to go back on the road. Led Zeppelin took every album seriously. I think that they just might have been lacking that inspiration amongst the four of them to continue making legit quality stuff.
Yeah, agreed. And I do want to make that point clear that you backed me up on, is that it's not wishing the demise of anybody at any certain age. It so happens that when there's a physical bookend to a project, a band, a movie director, an actor, if they are gone and we don't get any more of them, they are just as much a drug gone as they were here. The difference is we're not getting any additional work from them. So you're holding on to everything that they did prior to quote unquote being gone, even if they just break up.
Yeah.
And a band that I hope we get to one day has done that as well, who just kicked off their tour a couple weeks back now, where we thought for all intents and purposes they're gone. They're not ever getting back together. And from what I have seen and heard, they're doing pretty damn good. So you never know. But I think there would have been a point with Zeppelin specifically where there would have been some quote unquote dark years if they would have stood the test of time without anybody, kicking the bucket. But there may have been a reprise of what they were truly able to do collectively. So I think I'll always be sore for any band or any artist or any actor that I loved that is no longer around, because you always ask the question of if they would have just made it over that speed bump or that hump, what would be today? Like what would actually be 2025 version of where they are? And I'm sure without question that we would have gotten some amazing work at some point throughout the years that just doesn't exist. So,
yeah, it just probably would have been sprinkled amongst the rest of it. And that's two of the greatest what if questions in rock and roll are what if Led Zeppelin, what if John Bonham hadn't died? Well, he did. And then the second one would be, what if Led Zeppelin had replaced him? And there was a brief discussion about that, but ultimately the band, their hearts weren't in it, and I can understand that. All right, let's get to it. This is Drop the Needleheads. I'm Mike Carpenter, Schmiggy, along with Ben Yates, Yahtzee.
That's me.
And we are closing out The Pod Remains the Cast. 8 episodes. We are, again, not going to do Coda, but this is our Coda, so to speak, for this series within Through the Outdoor from 1979. Drop the Needleheads, where the records spin, the bourbon flows, and for one final time, the takes are as deep as the inside of John Bonham's bass drum. All right, Ben, before we get to the track by track, shall we do a little bit in the background of In Through the Outdoor?
Yeah, more important than probably ever, in my opinion, is the background of this album. For obvious reasons, we just hit on a lot of it. It is the bookend for the most part, if you don't take into account Coda and some of the other, unreleased things that came after this. So a lot of it adds to, anyway, going back to this, what I felt in the midst of listening to the album, and then sort of did a little deep dive into the background of the album. So
yeah, Coda is an afterthought, and it was just what they had left. This was kind of a triumph for the time, and in a way a comeback story for a band that had disappeared for the better part of 2 years. So as we left off in the Presence episode, I did mention that the album comes out after a bad car accident. Led Zeppelin does go on tour in 1977. By all accounts on the tour, from the band members, from the tour manager, it was ugly. Drugs were rampant. Heroin was all over the place. It's one thing, like in 75, it was maybe Coke. Okay, well, Coke isn't great if done to excess, but heroin adds this darkness. So it's pervasive throughout the scene. And then their 1977 tour ends in Oakland. Now, here are two things that happen in this last two-night stand in Oakland. I think they played where the A's play, at a big baseball stadium. Bill Graham was this, have you heard the name, infamous promoter of rock shows out in San Francisco. So he puts these shows on. Led Zeppelin goes out and they perform. And before the first show, I think it was one of Bill Graham's security guy's kids goes to a Led Zeppelin trailer and tries to take a name tag off of it to keep as a little keepsake. And I forget if it was John Bonham or... No, here's what... God damn it, what was it? Oh, it was Peter Grant. I'm sorry, the manager of Led Zeppelin, his son, takes one of these name tags, and it was one of Bill Graham's people that said, security guys that said, hey, kid, you can't do that. Peter Grant hears about this. I think the guy grabbed the kid's arm or something. Peter Grant, John Bonham, and a guy named John Bindon, who was a security guy for Zeppelin and a former gangster in London, beat this guy within an inch of his life. We're talking teeth and blood all over the trailer. Legit. Well, the band goes on and plays the show, and Bill Graham is pissed off, and he wants to arrest them, but he can't because he's got 40, 50,000 people watching them on his stage. The next night, the band comes back, and they force Bill Graham and his promotion company to sign some sort of letter, like basically keep your mouths shut about what happened. Well, what they didn't realize is that when you force someone to sign a document like that, it is not legally binding. You cannot coerce someone into signing a document like that. So after the show, I think it's the next morning, a SWAT team shows up at the Zeppelin Hotel. They arrest Peter Grant, John Bonham, John Bindon for assault, for basically damn near murdering a guy. He went on to survive, but Robert's like, I'm the fuck out of here. Tour's over. I think it's him and John Bonham actually out on bail, go to New Orleans to get a little bit R&R before they head back home. And he gets a call when he arrives in New Orleans from his wife and says, hey, Carrick, our son, 7 years old, is really sick. And it's some stomach thing. And Robert's like, hey, keep me posted. He's in New Orleans. What can he do? 6-7 hours later, he gets a call. His son's dead. And that was, just like the car accident, kind of the end of an era for Led Zeppelin. He goes, obviously, into grieving, which only makes sense. And not only that, but Zeppelin, they're tax exiles. They can't spend time in England without paying up the wazoo. So they're living here, there, and everywhere while he's trying to figure out life shit, They reconvene after about a year and 3 months off to rehearse in September 1978. And within that year and 3 months, Ben, what two genres, or subgenres, if you will, had become the soundtrack of the era? It was 1978.
Punk's making a little bit of an intro,
Punk
right?
for sure. And then on a pop side of things, something that rock fans particularly hated in the late 70s.
Oh, disco, probably.
Yeah, so it's disco and punk. So where the fuck does Zeppelin fit in with this? They don't. So they are, in a way, considered dinosaurs. They're along the lines of I guess the Rolling Stones, but to their credit, they put out in 1978 Some Girls, and the lead single is a disco rock track. So the Stones were always adept at adapting. Zeppelin hadn't had to do that. They hadn't been around long enough, for one, and two, they were so good at what they did, they could just be Led Zeppelin, but that all of a sudden, that's not cool anymore. So September 78, they go in for rehearsals. In November and December 78, they record at Polar Studios in Stockholm, Sweden. John Paul Jones and Robert are the main drivers of the songwriting and the recording and the production of this album. Jimmy Page, heroin addiction had begun to affect his work. John Bonham, alcohol had begun to affect his work. Both of those guys had a lot of pride in previous years where they did not let it affect their performance. It was starting to. John Paul Jones said, quote, there were two distinct camps by then. We, Plant and I, were in the relatively clean one. You know what I love about that is John Paul Jones doesn't say we were sober. He wasn't. Robert wasn't. Relatively clean. So in the day, John Paul Jones and Robert Plant, they work on tracks. Late at night, Jimmy Page and John Bonham come in to do their work. Sessions wrap up, and Jimmy takes the tapes to his home studio. Do you happen to remember where his home studio was located?
His home studio, Plumpton.
Plumpton, correct. He goes back to Plumpton. Okay. Left off the album, 3 rock and roll tracks. Wearing and Tearing, which is their response to punk. Ozone Baby, which is like a pop rock track. And Darlene, which is kind of a throwback 50s rock track. And Ben, you know from Decadence the song Mondo Rock. There is a lick from that song that is a straight rip from Darlene. I always like that song Darlene a lot. It's pretty underrated. All right. Jimmy Page has commented that it made sense for Zeppelin to make a keyboard album. I think he's really just saying that because Presence was so without it and only about guitars, and the fact that he was absent. Tell me what you think about this quote from Jimmy. Quote, John Paul Jones suddenly actually wrote whole numbers, which he hadn't done before, and I thought the way to go with this is to feature him on the keyboard. Do you sense any, I don't know, do you feel like he's twisting the truth a little bit there? Basically saying, I let him do the keyboard album. I thought it was a good idea.
Who wrote that?
Jimmy Page said that after the release.
Yeah, that seems like a little bit of a slighted comment to hit a nerve because, I mean, as we know of JPJ's work early on, that to me is a stretch of what he had done for the band early on. So
I mean, the fact that he wrote the riff to Black Dog, I know that's not the complete song, but that's basically, it does not exist without it. No Quarter, he was the one that drafted that up too. So, all right. So anyways, they go into the studio 2 months in Stockholm, Sweden. It's cold. I think the album reflects some of that in one hand, but the other hand, there are some really fun tracks on it. This is also a very weird album for Jimmy Page. You thought he was cooking on it, and I would agree that his stuff is weird. But even he went on to say that the thing with In Through the Outdoor is that there's nothing like an Achilles' Last Stand or a Kashmir on there. He was again admitting this is not a guitar album. Now, later on, we're going to get into the reception, but it takes, of course, another delayed, 8 months to put this thing out because of the artwork. They wanted to release it in time for the Nebworth concerts. It came out a week or two later, so they played songs that no one had ever heard when they made those two appearances that you would see on the Led Zeppelin DVD.
Insane, man. I mean, number one, just from all that dialogue, I'm going to hit on the last point that you made with the studio, the album artwork being delayed. It was yet again Hypnosis. So
Strom Thurgeson.
By this point, do they not have their shit together to say we've been delayed before? Like, let's make sure that doesn't happen again? Or is that just a coy way of saying we need more time to produce this thing?
I wonder, here's my theory, what the album came out with, talking about the cover art, because there were, I think, 6 variations, and the front and back were different on all of them, but they all take place in that same sepia-tone bar room with the same guy in a white suit, and there's a bartender, and there's a couple other barflies. My theory is this. The artwork delay, so they could encourage sales, they would ship this with a paper bag over the album, right? And there is the stamp on the front that has the band and the album name, and on the back there's the stamp with the track listing.
Well, that was a way that bootlegs came out too. Did you know that?
I did not.
And
so that's why they made it designed to look like one.
They made it obvious that it was their version of what they felt would already come out. To kind of get ahead of it.
That's kind of
like
cool.
Gentle nudge of like, fuck everybody for bootlegging our shit type of deal. Here's a question though, because I did not do a deep dive into the research on the album itself. Is that not Jimmy on the cover?
It is not Jimmy, but you're right. It does look like late 70s Jimmy.
Okay. Now I can see it. I pulled it up as we're talking here, and it's clearly not him, but I think my entire life I thought that was a solo Jimmy just sitting at the bar.
That's fair. Now, the other thing, too, is the album name. When you hear In Through the Outdoor, does it conjure anything up for you? Like any meanings or?
I think a questionable sex act in the bedroom.
Yes, that was something that I think was not lost on listeners.
Through the Outdoor, backdoor woman type of innuendo.
So here's what they said it was about. That it was them trying to get back into the public mind in 1978, 79 was like, quote, trying to get in through the outdoor. Makes sense, but of course, it is also cheeky. It reminds me of Van Halen. They released one of their Sammy Hagar albums, and they called it For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, which the acronym, of course, right? And they straight up, before they named it that, wanted to just call the album Fuck.
Right.
And the record company said, you can't do that. So then they were like, well, okay. And apparently they found some sort of, there's an old fable. I think it's been disproven that that word comes from the phrase "for unlawful carnal knowledge," because carnal knowledge is any knowledge about sex acts. So it's, rock bands do this all the time. It's basically how Spinal Tap wrote "Sex Farm."
What you're telling me is this was supposed to be called anal, and the record company was like, no.
I mean, it might as well have been. And keep in mind, too, Zeppelin were no strangers to, gay bars and stuff like that. They hung out there. John Paul Jones fell asleep in a bed in New Orleans and almost lit his hotel room on fire with a transvestite. So
yeah.
This band, listen, they were not prudes by any stretch. But no, Went Through the Outdoor, they say, was in reference to the fact that they were trying to break their way back in. And, that by itself would make sense because they were, while only having been gone for 2 years when it got released, that was an eternity back then. Bands were releasing an album every year. They were on tour 3-4 times a year. They had disappeared, and music had changed drastically. How well did this album do? We're going to get into the reception after the tracks about sales and critical response, but as I had mentioned earlier, overall, this was deemed to be a comeback album and a fairly triumphant one for a band that had briefly become uncool.
Awesome.
Do we get in the tracks?
Yeah, let's roll.
All right, starting with In the Evening. Now, this one begins with an intro, very synth heavy. Jimmy Page is using a gizmotron. Have you heard of a gizmotron before, Ben?
I have.
It is created, or was, I should say, by two members of the band 10cc. We're talking about cheeky names. Do you have any idea what 10cc is in reference to?
Implants?
No.
I have no idea.
It is a unit of measurement, right? Cubic centimeters. Apparently, 10cc is the average amount of male ejaculate.
Wow.
And that's how they named their band. What was going on back in the day? Do you think people were so repressed that they looked for any avenue to be provocative?
I think this was a time coming off of, I use my grandparents as reference here, but like their generation was very conservative. And I'm not, throwing out a political reference.
No, yeah.
Like really conservative and, boundaries around what you discussed with family and friends, what you discussed at the workplace, how you performed in the workplace, what you took home, even social gatherings, dude. I mean, like, it wasn't until this next generation, what we're talking about here with Zeppelin and the guys in 10cc, they were part of a generation that was so pent up probably from living under that conservative guise that they were still up against that, because you're talking about record executives and a market of people that if you came out and called it anything other than 10cc and you were more literal about the fact, or the fuck album, it would have immediately just been cast astray, because that's the nature of the beast back then. And I don't think that ever slowed down. I mean, you look at what NWA went through and a number of other artists over the decades. Like, there's always going to be those people who are headhunting the content that's being put in front of them and their children, depending upon where they are. It's just so funny to look back at this specific time frame, because a lot of these, both in songs lyrically, early 70s all the way through to their band names and album names and things like that, is it went straight over the heads of these people that seemed like totally dialed into watching for these things, like the crossing guards, if you will, of rock music. And that's probably the reason they did it, is they're like, hey, we're smart. I mean, for those that don't think we are, and we kind of know how to get our point through without really getting it through. So what a crazy time to be alive back then, for sure. But
a little diversion there from the song, but yeah, it struck me that this gizmotron, which has a really cool effect. I mean, I will say this is a really cool album opener, and when it goes from that intro to them crashing in, I mean, that hits for you, right?
Oh, yeah. Does it ever? I mean, it's one of those songs where I wish that found more of itself throughout the song. very short track listing, so we can't give up too much in this portion of it without getting to
Yeah.
our. But this is one that always resounded with me over the years, like beyond what album it was on. So this was yet another staple of a song that was on In Through the Outdoor that I wouldn't have been able to tell you was on In Through the Outdoor, which was a later album of Zeppelin. I would have, although now listening to it, obviously has essences of like 80s and some other genres that are thrown in there, but it just kind of was all encompassed into just being Zeppelin, and I heavily enjoyed it. And then picked up on, a lot of the backstory here and things that just blows my mind that this is what they chose to open this album with. So,
But do you think they're the best song? Because it seemed like you were inching that way. The best moment on this song is that, like, let's say 10 seconds from where the intro ends and the song proper begins. Like, do you think that's the most impactful 10 seconds of the 6:24 or whatever it is?
like, I could listen to that like 50 times
Yeah.
and not be upset. It's riding the rest of the wave that not bad, but not what you get in the first 20, 30 seconds of the song.
Agreed. And that's just it for me, is that the riff itself is good. And Robert's vocals are fine. I know his lyrics have been criticized as kind of indecipherable on this album. And the little kind of dreamy midsection, I think, is a nice little interlude in the middle of it. But to give you an example, kind of where I'm going with this album, the "Oh, I Need Your Love" chorus, like there's parts of this song that feel pasted on and feel like Zeppelin trying to do what Zeppelin should do in 1979. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like there's something to this song that, as much as I like it and I listen to it straight through and I'm not bored, I'm like, yeah, this is definitely 1979. This is, basically trying to reinvent the stadium anthem for what they were capable of at the time. To me, it sounds like Zeppelin trying to do a Zeppelin thing and laboring a bit to do that.
Yeah, I agree. It's perfectly put. I can't really tag on to that much. I
like it, but you don't love it, right?
It left me wanting. Yeah,
Okay.
it definitely left me wanting. And I don't want to get that twisted, because a lot of what I've argued in the preliminary albums here have been how good they are at giving you a bit and then making you continue on their journey artistically through an album or albums by doing that. However, I think we discussed it with Out on the Tiles. Like, there's just not enough of it. Like, give me 3x what that song is in terms of time. I'll be a happy camper, because it's not going to end too quickly. This sort of has that same essence where I'm like, man, maybe they didn't realize that was as impactful to the listener as it was, and obviously an opening track, but just kind of extend that a little more. So
maybe they could have done the In the Light thing and went back to that intro so they could break back in, because that's what's so effective about In the Light is you get 2 go-rounds with that breaking back in.
Right.
All right, now, for something completely different, Southbound Saurez or Soiree, I think it's Saurez. I've said it both ways, but very much a John Paul Jones composition. Rollicking piano. Him and Robert Plant. I don't think that maybe Jimmy's credited on this. There's a couple songs in the album where he's not, but regardless, a complete departure. Nothing like in the evening. I can only imagine what a Zeppelin fan thought when that piano starts plinking at the start of this track. But I'm going to be honest, and without trying to divulge anything about my Spiciest Biscuits, and just say from the outset, from the first time I heard this song, I groove to it. I really like what they're doing with this song.
Glad you said that, because I too have affinity to this song, and it's both now, I think, in the time frame of my life where I can find, like, not bashful to be like, I truly enjoy something that's like a little more ballroom, fared. And there's a quote. You have it written down here, actually. Dave Lewis conjures up the New Orleans barroom feel of the sleeve, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think if there's a track that dictates the album cover itself, it's this one. In terms of what you feel, maybe a double door or something that you're walking through, not necessarily Western, but like you're walking into a place that might be a little dicey, but also comfy, like a Huber's. And, this is what you're going to get from it. But the groove, man, I mean, from top to bottom, this is its own spicy biscuit and it's right? Like kind of like the crunch where it's like, this is unique, super unique, and also very familiar. And they just break into it. So, I mean, it's one that's come on Alexa recently at the house, and I've never a moment where I'm not totally into it while it's playing. So,
You mentioned that, and I was just thinking of a music video. Maybe it was Come On Eileen, which I think takes place in this kind of dingy bar in the outback or something. Or were Dexy's Midnight Runners Australian or English? Either way, you know what I'm talking about, the grainy 1980s music video with a bunch of weird characters kind of floating around. And if they were to place the music video for this inside of the cover art bar, and then you're kind of meeting the different weird strangers and stuff as Southbound Saurez is playing, I could envision that. Now, this is a year or two before MTV, so they didn't have any of that. I don't think Zeppelin ever had a music video, so to speak. But I need to shout out John Bonham on this. That is so hard to play. And there's a really cool moment late with maybe 30 seconds to go where the band kind of drops out. They hit the chord, right, and they let it ring out, and you just hear, and just the drums are kind of going by themselves for a little bit. And it really emphasizes just how cool a pattern that is. And it's not the last one on this album. John Bonham has some amazing things, and there's isolated tracks of his from this album on the internet, and I'm sure it's much easier to do now. So need to give that shout out because I know he wasn't in a good spot, but he still could churn out really good takes. And I thought he makes this song kind of rollick in a way that other drummers couldn't, I don't think.
Oh yeah, agreed, man. It's just a fruitful, like lovely song. And it's also kind of nice that it's not up against most of their other stuff because it is so unique. But I think that's why some of this album to me was relative in terms of my thought process on all the albums together because, this is just one that will get you grooving. And I think that's the most important thing. We know well a lot of bands that will throw a filler track in there. And I mean, it's as throwaway as humanly possible. This is not a throwaway track. So
I think most consider it that way, though. And I never have. I've always really looked forward to when In the Evening goes to track 2. And I'm like, oh, now we're cooking, which seems counterintuitive. Because it's not a rock song in the way that you would think Zeppelin would do it. And yet when it gets going and all 4 of them are playing, I don't know. I think this is a step, crazy as it sounds. Now I'm thinking when this song's playing, now we're going in a way that In the Evening might have been a really good opening track. And I think it is. But this one is now we're settling into the album. And I kind of like what this band's cooking up right now. Which leads into track 3. Fool in the Rain. Now, Fool in the Rain is not, kind of like Southbound Saurez, your typical Zeppelin song by any stretch. However, I think this is like Do You Make Her perfected. It's like the pop rock song with influences from other genres, in this case, samba. And this is a cool anecdote, Ben, is that they were watching the FIFA World Cup in 1978. And the tournament was in Argentina, and when they were watching it on TV, just like they do with the World Cup, they have musical themes that are based on that country. So you and I remember watching the South African, and they had all the vuvuzelas?
Vuvuzelas, yeah.
Yeah, and all that sort of like Lion King sounding music, which was maybe a little bit patronizing, but they were influenced by watching these soccer games, and they said, let's find a way to get a samba rhythm. They do that in the middle part of this song. I know when I first heard Fool in the Rain. Do you remember when you first heard this?
I sadly don't, and I think it's probably because we've heard it live by another certain artist that we know.
And by the way, Dave Matthews Band nails this.
They do nail it, and also with or without nailing it, I think there's something to hearing a song that you otherwise would never truly get the opportunity to hear live done well that adds just a cool resonance to why the song will hit a little bit differently. But I can't necessarily pinpoint the exact time that I heard this song, but I want to say it was like typical backseat of the car. When I was probably too old to still be riding in the backseat of the car with one of my parents, not both. Um, and this came on, and it just hits you, man. It's like I hate to say this over and over again because it just seems like it's my go to in terms of trying to describe a song, but um, this one grooves in a way that it always sounded familiar to me. Like the first time you hear it, you're like, "There's something to this." I can't put my finger on it because I can't necessarily dictate. Unlike a song coming up that I can kind of tell you what it directly reminds me of. This is one where it's so unique, but also so familiar at the same time that um, I it's like a really good friend. Like
Yeah.
you're one of my best friends. I can tell you the first time that we ever met and what led up to it and where life has taken us afterwards. So there's other people in my life where um, they've sort of just existed and I couldn't tell you where or when. And this is kind of that track to me. It's like Fool in the Rain's always been around. I've always heard it. I've always loved it. I've always known about it, but I can't pinpoint the exact moment that I heard it for the first time. What about, I mean, I know that you just described it earlier on with your dad. So
Yeah, I mean, it was just the cassette that we got from Circuit City, and then he, just like Stairway with Led Zeppelin 4, he goes to Stairway, we listen to that, great. We still got another 10 minutes to Paxton. Okay, throw that one with the brown cover in. Okay, boom. And then he goes to track 3, Fool in the Rain. But you hit on something I think that is really a key to the song's success. When it started, I'm fairly certain I'd never heard it on 105.9. I don't think it really got a ton of radio rotation on our classic rock stations. And yet it starts, and you're like, I swear I've heard that riff before. And it just, because it is so familiar, and it's almost like I can imagine John Paul Jones just playing piano. And this is the cool thing about songwriting, is sometimes when you come across something and you're like, that had to have been done before. Like, it's just so immediately recognizable. It had to have been done before. And yet, unlike some other Zeppelin songs where they get criticized for stealing, I don't think Fool in the Rain is one of them. I think it's just truly, he started playing a piano riff, and it just so happened to sound like an immediate earworm. I mean, it's just, it lodges in your brain, but not in some sort of annoying way. What I think is cool about the song, Ben, for a few things I think it's cool. One, at the end of each verse, they kind of go into that, can't really quite call it a chorus, but like Jimmy plays that acoustic. It goes like, like it's a cool layering thing. And then John Bonham's riding on the ride cymbal. And they're keeping this riff from getting like too repetitive. They don't really change chords or anything. There's no bridge. It's the same riff throughout the 6.5 minute song, and I could listen to it for another 6.5 minutes.
yeah, agreed. And also, I mean, just the leading up to the whistle and the
I love it. Yeah,
mambo or whatever the hell you would categorize that
samba.
as. Like,
It's a samba beat, apparently.
yeah. So, and this is going back to us seeing it live. I think most recently was
St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis. So the crowd anticipates that moment, and when it hits, you can't really look around because you're immersed in your own body and your mind and your own samba dance. But like, if you were to zoom out on the crowd, both pavilion and lawn, everybody is closed eyes, just doing whatever they're doing. It's like it's and dude, to say that that's a moment of a Dave show is like saying, well, yeah, what part of the Dave show did that happen to you at? But for some reason, this song specifically, that's like everybody has now lost their mind. They're no longer in their body.
Yeah.
Out of body experience. And I think that is a testament, not to Dave, that's a testament to this song, because that moment is when you just want to have a great time. I don't know what it is, but I just utilize seeing it live with Dave where that happens, and you look around and everybody is just smiling and dancing and doing the damn thing. And I'm like, wow. So, and what a weird direction in the song too. It works perfectly, but it's just not. First time listeners of that song would not be anticipating that direction either. So I think that's just it's coming. It's coming once you've heard it, but then you're now anticipating it. But it still surprises me. when it hits. So
I don't think they could go into or come out of that instrumental break any better. I say instrumental. Robert does do a little ooh, just don't want to, got thinking it over. Okay, so they're doing that break, right? It's about a minute long. Going into it with the whistle and coming out of it with like blum 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 bum bum bam 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 bam. How seamlessly they go back into the groove, right? And then Jimmy comes in with this weird like baritone guitar solo, but it works in the song. Here's a thought that I have about Zeppelin. They don't write a lot of songs that are pure joy, but the ones that I think of, if you say, what are the happiest Zeppelin songs? I would say Rock and Roll, just because it's a celebration of rock and roll. I would say The Ocean, and I would say Fool in the Rain. I think those three, if you're like, I love Zeppelin, but I need something to put a smile on my face. I need something to like give me a bounce in my step. Those three would do the ticket. It's just like a little bit of vitamin D in rock and roll music form.
I don't disagree with you, but it just shows what different parallels we're on in terms of happiness and where we want to be in that moment. Because to me, like going to California is...
Oh, yeah.
You throw that on, I'm a happy camper, even though it's...
Melancholic, a little bit.
In its demeanor of happiness. I find happiness within that song. But I get what you're saying. If you need to bring the mood up, in almost any setting, you could throw Fool in the Rain on, and I don't think there would be folks in the room that would be disappointed or unhappy. So I'm with you there.
This is the band that brought you Days of Confused.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, I think the track is basically the same length as Days of Confused, and then, here's Fool in the Rain. So one thing, and that's, stark example of how diverse they could be, but I think that just kind of illustrates how their discography is so fun because it is so varied. All right, so side A ends with a little bit of a kind of country music rave up. Hot Dog.
Hot Dog.
I would ask you the first time you've heard Hot Dog, but if you don't remember Fool in the Rain, you wouldn't remember the first time hearing this. But I mean, when you listened to it on re-listen this week, was it familiar, or were you like, "Oh, what's this"? Had you heard it before?
Both. Like, definitely heard it before. I've listened to this album prior to, unlike other albums of Zeppelin. I'm like, I can't tell you that I've gone the length of listening top to bottom, at a memorable go round. But this one definitely did. Just, I guess for one, it's 42 minutes, 7 tracks, and it was one that certain tracks. So we're about to get to one after this that was bestowed upon me by usual suspect here that we just earlier on, but
friend of the show.
I listened to it, and it was probably within one of those instances I'm mentioning over at their house where I was like going through the album, and I probably thought like, probably next. Like, this is one where I have to kind of be open, and rub some people the wrong way, but Hot Dog is probably the epitome of filler that I wish there was something else right here, especially the ending side A. I don't know. I don't necessarily mind it now, but I can't lie that the trajectory of knowing in Through the Outdoor that this isn't usually a next for me.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
It's fun, but and it was written about a girl in Texas that Robert had a long time fling with. So of course. But oddly enough, it was played on some of the shows. I think they played it in Nebworth, and they played it in their 80 shows in their 1980 shows in
I'll
Europe.
have to look up a live version to see if it sways my opinion on it, but
listen, we don't need to spend much time on it.
Robert wrote this song about one of his flings. It's like, what song didn't he do that about?
Yeah, I'd say a good 25% of them seem to be about that. So, you know what? We don't need to belabor the point on Hot Dog. It's an old Texas barbecue fried rock and roll romp, but it's not exactly poetry. Now, we're flipping the sides over. Carouselambra. I think I'm saying Carouselambra. Saying it right, I hope. Over 10 minutes long. It's the second longest song in Zeppelin's discography. Oh, no, third, actually, Ben. Can you name the 2 longer ones that we've talked about the last 2 weeks?
I can't off the top of my head.
Achilles' Last Stand, and In My Time of Dying.
Oh,
So
okay.
Carouselambra is one of 3 Zeppelin songs that's over 10 minutes. I think that's right. And if there's a song on this album that is a sign of optimism heading into the 80s, as far as like what Zeppelin might be able to do differently than what other bands are doing, I'd say it's this one. I'm not saying that everything works great on this song, but damned if I'm not like, oh, what was that? Whoa, check out this little lick they're doing here. Like, over that 10-minute journey, I am consistently engaged with what they're doing, and then when they do a rapid like shift or departure, I'm all ears. I'm really interested in the song, and it's one I've been thinking about a lot the last 2 weeks.
Interesting.
Are you not on that wavelength with Carouselambra?
I am. And actually, this is one where the usual suspect I was mentioning moments ago, Mr. Don Elmore, brought this into my purview and my realm. And I don't know if this was the case. Like I'm searching the ether and trying to pluck through the membranes of times past to feel if this was spawned because of another song. A song that came out in November of this same year by another band. It is what reminds me of this came out before. Okay. Carouselambra came out before. So the song I'm mentioning would have to remind me of Carouselambra, but for some reason Carouselambra reminds me of that song, which is, I think, probably more famous than Carouselambra.
What band?
Okay. So, like I mentioned, this is, I think, probably what brought Don to show me this song.
Okay.
It's because we were listening to The Wall by Pink Floyd, and a certain track on there has essences of what this song is. And I'm not saying that it's comparable or even sounds like it, but if once I say this, I hope it sort of resonates with you that it actually is kind of similar. Do you want to take a guess at the song, or you just want me to?
Okay, so quick question, because Carouselambra has basically 3 movements, right?
Yes.
It
is within, like, the first movement.
It's okay. Boy, that makes it tough, because if it was the second movement that's more moody with the like wow, if it's the first, I don't know. I'm stumped.
Run Like Hell.
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
What I'm talking about. So
yeah,
Don and I were going through The Wall.
Okay.
I was really into Run Like Hell, and he was like, "Let me throw on Carouselambra for you." I think that's how it went.
Wow.
So we were kind of doing a basement deep dive of some shit, and throw that song on, man. I mean, it's like it is very. It plays with each other in that act 1, like you said. I mean, it's not the whole time, nor is Run Like Hell for that matter, right? It goes a different direction itself, but I hold this song softly in my heart, probably because of that memory. But whether it was spawned from The Wall listen or not, I think that's how it went. That's how it will play in my head. But for sure, Don showed me this song. So that's the background on the first time I ever heard it.
That's really cool. And that you mention it, I think the beat is fairly similar. The tempo for sure is similar. And some of those like slashing chords that Jimmy plays, I can hear it. Now, it also reminds me just how good Run Like Hell is. And you know what's so crazy about that song? I don't think that the vocals, you know, like when Roger Waters comes in and he's yelling and then the chords or whatever. No, it's all about the groove with the bass and the drums, which is awesome. And then David Gilmour's guitar. Like, that's awesome, right? So Carouselambra, now that you mention it, I see that in the first part. My favorite movement has always been the second. And do you know what Robert is singing about in that second movement?
I don't.
I'm going to pull up the lyrics here because the one criticism levied towards Carouselambra is that it is damn near impossible to understand what the hell Robert's saying. But in that middle part, he says, "Where was your word? Where did you go? Where was your helping? Where Was Your Bow? And as we talked about in the last episode with Presence, Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones and Peter Grant, I'm pretty sure, did not go to his son's funeral. And that was a big turn for Robert and how he viewed the band. So it has been long speculated that those two lines are in direct reference to those guys for not being by his side when he needed them. And that the rest of this, man, if you read the lyrics to this song, I mean, shit, it's like Achilles' Last Stand mixed with a James Joyce complete, like, I don't know. It's ambiguous as hell. So, Carouselambra, though, my favorite movement, if I were to ask you, of the first, second, and third movement, what is your favorite? I'm going to go with the second, the moody one, which I think the guitar stuff Jimmy's doing is awesome. But an argument could be made for any of the three.
I think probably the first movement, and it just captures me, and it could be Run Like Hell. I mean, I don't really know. I just think that there's some of that guitar and the speed and the motion that it puts me into. I don't know, man. It's really hard to categorize this song even. I mean, it's I say it often about the songs that I do love about Zeppelin, of how unique they are. The ones that stand out for me are the ones that aren't like any other Zeppelin song while totally being Zeppelin. This is one of those, and it just is unique, the fact that it has like 3 different quote unquote acts to it. This is another sneaky 10-minute, 30-second song too, where I never ever get through this song and think that I just experienced 10 minutes of music. Mm-hmm. I throw it on in the car. I throw it on mowing, and hell, I even threw it on last night during tattooing. I mean, time totally disappears when you're getting tattooed. But just of all the Zeppelin songs that are quote unquote epics or longer, this is one that for sure never gives off you just heard 10 minutes straight of music. So
it does not feel its length. That is for sure. Yeah, it is. And you mentioned the uniqueness of it. I think that is definitely worth saying just how this song, you mentioned Run Like Hell, and I do see a similarity in the tempo and the guitar, but for the most part, it is its own bag. And I think one thing that's a bit unfortunate about the North American tour in 1980 that never was, they were intending to play this song on the 1988 North American tour. That never happened. They did not do it in Europe. They didn't do it in Ebworth. It was too much for them to rehearse. Obviously, I was listening to it and thinking, how does a band rehearse? How does a band figure out all the changes within the song? And I don't know how many takes they needed, but to do this live and to not stumble over yourself, I'm not really sure of that either. But a latter-day Zeppelin classic. I don't know if I'd go that far, but is it the most intriguing thing as to what could have come in the future? I think so.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't have much to say on it beyond kind of what I did. It's just so unique, and it's always difficult to kind of paint a modern day picture of my takeaway because the story about how I know for a fact of where I was when I first heard it. So that's that.
On we go. All My Love. All right, this is maybe, alongside Fool in the Rain, the most recognizable song from In Through the Outdoor, written by Robert for his son Carrick, and a very pretty song. And I say pretty, I mean, that almost sounds like a slight. I don't mean it like that. I think it is maybe one of the more, God, you mentioned like Eric Clapton, 80s, 90s work. This seems to fit in that realm of like rock gods doing something that you would hear on 97.5 Light Rock WHMS.
The interesting takeaway for me on this one is I always love to see something like that where when I hear this song, when I've heard this song historically, I've never, ever chalked it up as a love, despite the word love being in it over and over again, and that being the title of the song, I've never taken it as a love ballad to a woman or a female or a male. I mean, depending upon your orientation. Um, it it actually lands with exactly what and how it was written for Carrick, and I didn't even know that up until this very moment right now. So, um, it it doesn't give off that like unauthentic vibe, if you will. But I also, from the production standpoint of it and kind of the way it delivers, is very 80s kind of balladly. So,
What do you think about the overall synthesizer sound? Because you mentioned the 80s, and there's certain 80s production I love. And one thing that's always been a struggle for me with this song is it just, even the way it starts is like, just kind of like, I don't want to say dopey, but that synthesizer sound, not that it should be forceful or like jump from Van Halen, but it's very lilting, you know? I love the solo, but it sounds kind of, the tone he uses is interesting.
Yeah, this is such a historic Zeppelin song in my mental catalog that I don't know if I've ever taken the negative critique about it that deeply, to be honest. I mean, it's just, it is not my spiciest biscuit, so I'm not ruining anything here, but I've always had a fondness for it, and I think it's always just yet another tried and true Zeppelin track where if it comes on 105.9 when I was a kid, or was played at any get together or anything like that, it was just what it was. It makes me happy though. It is a happy song, amongst something like Fool in the Rain or something where, like I said, finding out that it was composed and written for, in honor of Carrick is interesting, because and it doesn't mean that it needs to be sad or be a down song, but it's always brought me up. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that why did this just occur to me? Jimmy Page has an acoustic guitar solo, and it's nothing too flashy or anything, but the whole time he's doing it, John Paul Jones is just going to town on the keyboards, like keyboard strings. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, like just fucking going, man. And it's just like, I will tell you my favorite part musically of this song. It's da-da-dun, 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 dun-dun-dun. That is cool. And then Jimmy has some good licks over it. I think that overall, it's a well-composed and well-arranged song. I can't point at many things and say, man, that's not how the verse should be or not how the chorus should be. I think it all works together.
Yeah, I agree. This album specifically, I think the two tracks that are perfectly composed are Fool in the Rain and All of My Love. Like, they are actual, not that the others are not.
I get it.
I'm just saying that there is a general flow and composition to the way those two tracks go that seem quote unquote perfect. Like, and it's hard to stray from that because of what's presented to you. Like, I don't know, I feel like you could go back to the caveman or fast forward time like 5,000 years, and you could play either one of those songs for anybody that's listening, and they're going to just kind of, okay, like it's perfectly sectioned into each way that you would think it was going to flow from one section to the next.
It does flow.
I don't know if that perfection, I know that it resonates with me as like, I never bat an eye. I love this song, but I can also see where at times I've definitely tracked forward on this song. I've heard it on the radio and I've gone to another channel. Like, I'm not going to lie in that respect. It's more the fact that like there's maybe some of that gives you essences of maybe being produced too perfectly. There's no
it's how to put it. I think you're onto something there. It's almost sterile. It's overcooked, meaning they really put a lot of effort into making sure this is super tight. Whereas a song like Carouselambra, which is all over the map, is more crackling with energy. Not that energy was what All My Love Is going for, but I do feel like it is a stab at maybe getting a radio hit.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think the lyrics are probably the best part of it. I think his vocal performance is good. I think objectively you could say every band member is good on this. But as a complete package, is this one of the rare elements where the sum is lesser than the parts? I don't want to say much more because we got Spiciest Biscuits coming up.
We do, yeah. No, I like that point, and I think I'll stew on it for a little bit. His
Stew.
vocal, though, I mean, like the deepness that he goes into sometimes, where pre-chorus and stuff. It's just there are moments of this song that are like, fuck, like it's Zeppelin, dude, and they're just still so goddamn good, even right here at in the 11th hour, so to speak. So,
shall we wrap up this album?
Yeah, let's go ahead. That was fast, man.
I'm Gonna Crawl is the last track, not just on a Zeppelin album, well, on this Zeppelin album, but really for a Zeppelin official studio album release. And the way that Robert Plant described it was they were trying to do sort of like an old blues or a Wilson Pickett kind of song, because it's not, when we say blues, like a Howlin' Wolf kind of blues. This is much more of an early 60s kind of slow burner. And you wouldn't assume it from the beginning because there's a nice little string intro from John Paul Jones. And the band kind of eases their way into it. And then 5 minutes in, Robert Plant is literally screaming, howling in pain for a lost love or something like that. And they didn't intend for this to be their last song. I don't mind that it is. I don't mind that historically this is the last song on an official Zeppelin release, because there is something sort of farewell about it that I've always, I don't know if I'm like, projecting that on this song, but it seems like an okay finale given the circumstances.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I guess I just haven't really been able to take it that deeply. I think it might be partial coming off of All of My Love and then kind of being the closing track. I enjoy it. But historically I didn't ever look at this album like it was their last like official release either. So it was always hard to like take a track like that and say, oh, I'm going to, think about this from some other perspective. But I do get the essence of the Wilson Pickett and the Otis Redding and things of that level. So I just don't, I like most things Zeppelin too. It just bodes the fact of like the naming credentials for some of these songs. You go from like Carouselambra, which is so thought provoking, and it's like, what the fuck is that? Like, is it candelabra? Is it a carousel? Is it what? Is it both together? How'd they come up with that?
It's
like
a cool name. Cool name.
Awesome. You got Hot Dog. Then you got I'm Gonna Crawl. I don't know. It's there's no rhyme or reason to anything that they seem to do, but it works as well. So it's just it's.
Don't you feel like you would have looked at the track listing and you saw Hot Dog and thought, what the fuck? Like, before you even listen to it, it's not going to be a serious song.
Yeah, for sure. And some songs don't matter. Some
True.
album titles don't matter. Some do.
And this album may be the most stark example of that. Between songs where you could tell they were really going for it, and other songs are like, what the hell, just throw that one on there. And that's what makes it kind of a confounding album. I'm not going to say bad, because I don't think it is a bad album. And it's enjoyable. Even the bad stuff I still listen to, and I either laugh at Hot Dog or I don't want to reveal too much. But yeah, I'm Gonna Crawl is more interesting than I think it is good. But it's not boring. And the cool parts of it, like I think the every little thing, da-na-na-na-na, ba-dum, like that build up right before the very kind of like heartbreaking guitar solo. I think Jimmy's best solo on the album. It's very, I don't know, it just reeks of sadness and like a depressed man crying in fetal position or something. Yeah, there's really cool moments on it, and yet by the end of it, it just kind of ends. and that's it.
Yep.
And the needle raises, and that's Led Zeppelin's last studio track.
Yep. Crazy.
God damn. Well, this album, came out on, I want to make sure I get the date right here, August of 1979. And this was just a week after they had done their second Nebworth show. And it was considered quite the comeback for Led Zeppelin. I don't think anyone was labeling it as a, classic or anything, but I think the presence, because it is so dark and not a lot of hooks or anything on it, was seen as a downer of sorts, and meanwhile, In Through the Outdoor was seen as like, hey, they're back. It's not the most guitar heavy album, but there's energy and they're reinvigorated, and they might have a place in the music industry. So, critics were not as kind as the fans themselves. There are a few anecdotes that you'll find online that, this album release single-handedly saved the music industry, because while disco was popular, it wasn't selling to the degree that, let's say, the Rolling Stones and Zeppelin and the Beatles were a decade earlier. And punk, while it was popular among certain circles, that wasn't selling any albums hardly at all. So you have this band come back, sell a shit ton of albums. All of their previous albums end up on the Billboard 200 within a week of its release. And it has sold, this kind of surprises me, 6 million copies in America. This album. So it sold plenty well. It sold great back then. And then the reviews were fairly, mileage may vary based on the reviewer. I think that it was a weird time for them then, because the music was not like what was in either the mainstream or what rock critics were really digging at the time. So you listen to it, and I still listen to it now, and I think, well, what box does this fit in? And I don't have an answer for that, and maybe that's a credit to the album all these years later that I can't pigeonhole it and say this is this or it's that.
I agree. It's weird too, because not that, necessarily your music would rub off on where you record it, but the fact that they were in ABBA's studio in this time of disco and such, it's like, oh, that's a little dicey for the most part if you're wanting to stray away from that. But really insane to sell 1.7 million copies within the first few weeks of release, and sit number one during that time frame. I mean, not surprised. It's weird. It's like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place and saying it's not surprising, because that's Zeppelin releasing an album. So if you're talking about anticipation, I can imagine back then there was no greater anticipation than knowing that Zeppelin was about to release something, which probably added to the reason that they sold so many up front and they sat up there. That said, it's also a great album, and one that definitely did not have competition in 79 either. So
this is one thing I want to be careful of, as I said that it was viewed as a comeback. And what I mean by that is more from the sales perspective. The critics were not kind to it, but then again, the critics were never uniformly kind to Zeppelin, apart from maybe the fourth album. And I think Physical Graffiti got mostly praised when it came out. But I thought that this little thing from the Rolling Stone album guide came out in 2004. I thought this quote from Gaylord Fields was pretty perfect. Quote, maligned upon its release as a retreat from heaviness, it now stands as an art rock oddity with some alluring tangents. I think the word oddity and the fact that it does have some cool tangents, I think that kind of perfectly describes the album. It's not a classic. It's not a 5-star, but you are interested while listening to it, and it is an oddity, not just in Zeppelin's catalog, but I don't know, find me another band that made an album like this. It's hard to do.
Yeah, I probably said it too much this episode, and maybe a little too much in the entire miniseries here, but Unique is probably my overarching catalog title for this band, because they go in so many different directions. They have so many different genres that they tap into along the way, but it's all so familiar and it's so Zeppelin. Like, so when you categorize it, it's them. It's Led Zeppelin, to this day. Like, you hear some bands try to emulate it, some I won't mention, but like, it's, a Zeppelin sound when you hear it, regardless of who's doing it, specifically when the band does it. But then you have certain songs like Fool in the Rain coming in on this one, and it's like it's even from the darkest critics has to be somewhat refreshing to be like, well, they're still throwing curveballs, and they could so easily fit right into one 5, 6 track mold every album, and they would probably still have sold a shit ton because it's Led Zeppelin, and they would just be leaning on the riff rock, guitar heavy albums that they know they could put out. And you have to appreciate the fact that they went through many iterations of exploration in putting a product out, and personal experience and tragedy and triumph that the end result, I think, speaks volumes to them leaning into that as their muse and not anything else. And you find a lot of bands, both nowadays and historically, that crack a nut and then they just bleed it to death. And they last 1 or 2 albums. And then by the time people figure it out, the jig's on you that, hey, I'm kind of done with them unless they can come out with something more refreshing. And God, for the time and for what they did to continue to sort of bend that is pretty insane. So
I think if they make 2-track choices, this is an infinitely better album. I think if you get rid of, well, hold on. Let's remind me to do this after Spiciest Biscuit. Okay, because I would have said it and then it would have revealed far too much. All right, let's get to it. We have a little bit of an extended edition of our Spiciest Biscuit categories because we're going to do this album as we normally do, and then we're going to wrap things up with a full album ranking of Led Zeppelin, and each of us will deem what we think is the spiciest of all Zeppelin spicy biscuits and the dustiest of all dusty crumpets. Now, here are the categories. Excuse me, hiccup. Here are the categories that we so often do here on this show. The first one's going to be Killer Line, which is a mix of lyric and delivery, alternative album title, MVP, side A or side B, dustiest crumpet, and spiciest biscuit. Who should begin?
I think you began last time.
All right, you kick things off.
And I will. Oddly enough, this was a snippet of a song that you had said, I think, lacked some of this in terms of lyrical content. But for me, it was, hey, it's lonely at the bottom. Man, it's dizzy at the top. But if you're standing in the middle, oh, ain't no way you're going to stop. Can you pick out what song that's from?
Is that In the Evening or Carouselambra?
In the Evening, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
I don't know. You know me. It's like that's to me an empowering lyric, but it's one that's like sort of, I mean, no pun intended, right in the middle in terms of,
yeah,
but like, I think it just was so thought provoking to me to say, you certainly don't want to be in the bottom, and being up top is, heavy as the head that wears the crown type of situation. And to me, it was also sort of maybe a plea or a cry from Robert to be like, I'm struggling with sitting at the top. I also clearly don't want to just bow out and sit at the bottom. So
yeah, and I think that probably was after after a decade's worth of being in the biggest band in the world, and then you have what happened to him with his family, completely recenters everything about you. And I think that what he got really good at in Presence and then Through the Outdoor was the lyrics were so often about that. I mean, it was as introspective as he got, because really the early albums don't have that. While his voice wasn't what it was in the early albums, I think his lyrics in some ways did get better.
And this is getting super nitpicky, and I agree with you, but to throw the word dizzy into a lyric in this song, he does it so subtly where you don't even really pick up on it unless you sort of read along with the lyrics. I think it's just some amazing lyric writing too, the way he did it. I just love, I love the word dizzy, like in general, but just to kind of read it in context to where he was going with that was pretty cool to see. So
dizzy is it's not onomatopoeia, which is like the word that mimics the sound, yet dizzy is a word that seems to conjure up the feeling of being dizzy. I don't know if that makes it's like I so closely align it to the sense itself. All right, I went with this line, which is not much to do with the lyrical content, but the delivery. It's always tickled me. Now I will stand in the rain on the corner. I watch the people go shuffling downtown. I don't know why. The way he delivers that line in Fool in the Rain, it's a throwaway lyric. I watch the people go shuffling downtown. Like, just, it's a playfulness and just dicking around. He probably did in one rehearsal, like, oh, I like that. Or JPJ was like, hey, go low like that. That's cool.
Yep.
Every time, dude. Like, I never saw Zeppelin play this. They never played it live. John Paul or Jimmy Page and Robert Plant never played it live. In fact, Robert Plant only did it once with Pearl Jam in 2005.
Yeah.
So when we've heard it with Dave Matthews Band and it gets to that line, I'm really excited because in a concert setting, I get to do that silly little delivery that just always has tickled me. I don't know why. It just makes me happy.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. I love, and that's the beauty behind this here killer line is it doesn't necessarily have to be deep lyrical content. And this journey through Zeppelin has really hit home for me in that respect because during Zeppelin 1, I think I was always like, I gotta find that. I gotta find that heavy hitter lyric that I want to be I want to find the most outstanding. And it's like, be perfectly frank, man. Robert Plant, although very complex and thought provoking in a lot of his delivery, is very tell it to me like I'm five style, where like he does such a good job at provoking something like saying dizzy. To me, man, the way I looked into it's dizzy at the top is like it's chaotic. It's it's insane. It's something you can't fathom. Where many take it as like literal, like it's dizzy, like it's disorienting. So that example right there is I think what he's done historically in all of these albums is he has a method to his delivery and he's gone deep, obviously, but also the storytelling aspect and where they've plucked some of those stories from in terms of Lord of the Rings and all that. Um, I think bodes to the fact that he's very simplistic in looking at it doesn't necessarily matter what the lyrical content is, it is truly the delivery and how it will resonate with the listener over the sonic waves of what the music is doing, which I think is again why we've already hit on it, but All of My Love was so refreshing because those are so directly meaningful. And now I know even more meaningful than I was taking it up front that when he did decide to deliver meaningful lyrics that needed to hit a note, he also could do it. So
yeah, I appreciate that he was always, and obviously the early days were Baby and, just, I mean, it was a lot of rock and blues cliches.
How can I howl and make people's big toes stand up in their boot and know that we're here and we've arrived to not being, bashful or ashamed to be like, we're going to take it back a couple steps here and be a little more simple. And they know what we're capable of. But I also don't think they were like easing up. I don't mean that. They weren't letting off the reins by any standard, but I just don't think they were feeling like they needed to just go out there and, break glass, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think that he had a lot of growth lyrically. And yet, even within this album, Fool in the Rain, I picked a line that's not profound. Or Hot Dog, like, he never took himself too seriously where he couldn't just have fun. All right, the next one is alternative album title.
Yeah.
I'm going with the cover art. I'm going with what ultimately became the historical context of this album, Last Call.
Not too far off from mine, man.
Okay, and I mean, the barroom setting, okay, sure. The fact that it was ultimately theirs, of course, they would not have called it then. I think In Through the Outdoor is a cool title. I like the wordplay with it. I like the cheeky references to what it could be. But I think that ultimately where it stands in Zeppelin's discography, that was the easy pick that came to mind.
I'll leave this to our loyal Redditors to vote, but I already know what my favorite is now based on the two of ours because it's definitely yours for multiple reasons. Number one, Last Call can mean a multitude of things in this respect, right? Like it's their last official release, but also just it gives you that essence of what the cover art does and what the album is. Mine was Happy Hour. I felt a very similar way, like I told you with Huber's, like popping in, loose and tie. I'm meeting you guys for a couple quick beverages and some darts at 4:45, and then I'm still trying to make it home by 7:30 for dinner and bath and bedtime, and I don't want anything that's gonna stretch that time frame. So like a really great band or a heavy game of cards or something at Huber's would definitely derail that whole scenario. And then you're in the doghouse, you're calling the wife and letting her know you're running late. On the flip side, I want some entertainment. And so I think that this album, the way it was formulated and put together, is perfect in way of saying, we're going to get you. We've got things that will resonate and stand the test of time. We've got other tracks that, are going to be the background noise to conversation, laughter, and darts. And that's how I came up with Happy Hour. But that said, uh, between the two of our titles, I definitely prefer yours because I think it also speaks to that happy hour, but delivers the punch of what reality was for Zeppelin at this time too. So I love that.
You know what could have worked too is just naming it some sort of blank tavern, like or blank bar. The idea being Alice's restaurant,
Yeah.
and just naming it Joe's watering hole. I mean, just some random shit, like naming the place we see on the cover,
Yep.
and just giving it some random name. But yeah, I was wondering when I named it last call, I was like, I would not be surprised if this would be the rare example where we literally just picked the same name.
Yeah.
For the album. All right,
Same track.
you are going to start off with, is it MVP? Go.
Yeah. So it ended up being a tie. I came down to John Paul Jones and Robert. And I think the crazy part is before knowing any of the historical background of the album itself, and how heavy-handed the two of them were on it, I just got senses of JPJ's spice and ability on formulating tracks throughout. And Robert, though, was the one that, as you stated, things like shuffling downtown, like he added Robert isms throughout the album that added to my joy of this album in totality, and it was just back to back to back to back to back. So Robert Plant, my final and last MVP of this Zeppelin journey.
I like that pick, and I'm glad that we will not have the same one. I could have, based on Fool in the Rain and Southbound Saurez and Carouselambra alone, went John Bonham, but there are some other tracks where he's basically middling, so I'm going to go John Paul Jones. I know it's kind of predictable given the makeup of this album and how big the keyboards are on it, but yeah, John Paul Jones for me gets the nod on this one for the synthesizers in the evening, for the piano in Southbound Saurez and Fool in the Rain and Hot Dog, and for side B, Carouselambra is a band composition, so I don't know how much Jimmy had on that compared to John Paul Jones, but the synthesizers are actually, I think, utilized to great effect in that song. I think it's John Paul Jones based on the fact that all these years later, kind of out of necessity, he had to be the band leader, and it just shows how versatile he was. Do I like a John Paul Jones Led Zeppelin more than I do a Jimmy Page led Led Zeppelin? No, I don't. But he had to do it. Somebody had to do it. Him and Robert did it, and I think that instrumentally he had a lot. So I will give John Paul Jones his flowers one more time. And if I recall, I think Robert Plant I gave MVP for 3. I gave Jimmy for 1, 2, and Physical Graffiti. I gave John Bonham for 4. And I gave John Paul Jones for this one, House of the Holy. So I spread the wealth. I think you hit all 4 too.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I know that for Presence, I had Bonham. Let me think here. Physical Graffiti, I had Bonham. um, House of the Holy, JPJ. Let me see here. Fourth album, I had Bonham. Bonham is.
Yeah, we both did, yeah.
I also gave Plant his nod on 3. And JPJ on 2,
And Jimmy on 1.
Jimmy on 1.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we had some good variation in that. Okay, the next one here is for side A or side B.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do the honors. For me, side A. Not that I love everything on side A, but I think it's a pretty enjoyable set of 4 songs. I think it's pretty breezy. I think that if that were to indicate what was coming up on side B, then this album would make a lot more sense. But side B is kind of a radical departure in some ways. I just enjoy side A more. I think they're both very flawed, but it's got Fool in the Rain, kind of holding down the fort right in the middle of it. Whereas side B is only 3 tracks, and I don't know if any of those tracks necessarily has the strength to kind of anchor that side. So side A for me.
Yep. No suspense here. Side A for me as well. And you well know how I do my rankings. I will say, though, of the top 4 tracks, it was a dead tie in terms of 2 and 2, but A was the top 2 and B was the bottom of the top 4. So A as well. And like you said, I mean, Full of the Rain was sort of the full tipping point there, because it was, the fact that it was the glue right in the middle there that I feel like was, how could you not pick A?
All right, is this it? I mean, we are now going to do our song rankings, but before we do that, we need to predict each other's Spiciest Biscuit and Dustiest Crumpet.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go first, so I'm going to predict that your Spiciest Biscuit is Carouselambra, and your Dustiest Crumpet is Hot Dog.
Yeah.
So let's hear it.
Dustiest Crumpet, Hot Diggity Dog.
Yeah, sorry, Hot Dog.
Coming in at 6 off of side B, I'm going to Crawl.
Okay.
Coming in at 5, Southbound, and I've always read it as Saurez, but
I think it is.
Saurez, so we'll probably get corrected on that from listeners, but number 5, Southbound, Saurez. 4, All of My Love. 3, Carouselambra. 2, In the Evening. 1, Fool in the Rain.
Okay. I will withhold any comments until I do mine. So what are your predictions?
I predict that you will have your Dustiest Crumpet as Hot Dog. And I believe your Spiciest Biscuit of this album will be Fool in the Rain.
Okay. Well, my Dustiest Crumpet is in fact Hot Dog. It's funny, and I don't hate that they did it, but if they would have substituted that with Darlene, which I recommend give that a listen, then it's an infinitely better choice. 6, All My Love. I tried to withhold saying this when we talked about it because it would have divulged too much. This song, kind of like Thank You on Led Zeppelin 2, I'm not averse to ballads. This is just a bit saccharine, despite the lyrical content. I think musically it's kind of dopey. Just is. I've tried. I really have. Number 5, I'm Gonna Crawl. Interesting. I think it is going in a cool bluesy direction, but it feels somehow incomplete. 4, In the Evening. Really cool parts to it, but as a whole, leaves me wanting a bit. Number 3, Carouselambra. I had it down at number 5 this morning, and it was at number 6 last week. And the more I listen to it, I'm like, fuck that, man. Move it up. Move it up. Because it is full of really cool ideas, and it's great performances, and it's crackling. It's not without its flaws, but I really enjoy it. Number 2, Southbound, Saurez. At number 2, and if it weren't for number 1, somehow Southbound Saurez would be my Spicy Biscuit, because I think it is a rollicking good time, and it showcases all 4 band members at just their peak. really have always loved Southbound Saurez. But my Spiciest Biscuit, no surprise. It's Fool in the Rain. It's a classic Zeppelin song, and it's not Stairway, and it's not Achilles' Last Stand. It's not Kashmir. It's not trying to be. It is them at their most fun, and they still kill it performance-wise. I mean, every band member on Fool in the Rain, top notch. So, one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. I know nostalgia plays a role, but I think objectively it is a great song.
You know, I appreciate you bouncing Southbound Suarez to your number 2 spot because it occurred to me to try to figure out a way to do the same thing. But in the evening, although I agree that it doesn't go the length in terms of what we would want it to, still resonates. Carouselambra is obviously a no-brainer, which you thought was my spiciest biscuit. We do need to note, though, just like we did with the Crunge, I did with the Crunge in parentheses, is that Southbound Suarez is literally the definition of what would be a spicy biscuit for us, not meaning the best song, but a spicy biscuit in and of itself. It encompasses everything that you would want from a groove and tune and delivers. So we're working with 7 tracks here, man. And I think it's unique given that fact that we, I think maybe for the first time on this journey, had the same Dustiest, Crumpet, same Spiciest Biscuit with alternative middles. So that's pretty sweet there. And unique, but it's also not at the same time because it was such a short album from top to bottom. So,
you know what my problem with Hot Dog is? Candy Store Rock was our Dustiest Crumpet on Presents.
mm-hmm.
They didn't have any other songs they could have put in its place. They had other options than Hot Dog. I don't know what compelled them to do it. And I'm telling you, you put Darlene as the closing track of side A. People are like, damn, that's a really good side A. And then they're invested even more because think about this, how jarring it is. You flip open your vinyl, you put on side A, Fool in the Rain, you're grooving, here's Hot Dog. You flip, and you're like, what the fuck? You flip it over, and then you play Carouselambra. Your head's already a mess because you don't know what you just listened to with Hot Dog. Like, what was the point of that? I try to give love to any track for what it is, but I just think that they had better options, and that bothers me. Now, we are done with this album, but we got to finish up with this band. So, for our final bit of business here, Ben, for Led Zeppelin, The Pod Remains the Cast, we need to award our all-time spiciest biscuit, our dustiest of crumpets, and we need to rank the albums. Which of those should we do? Let's do the albums first.
Yep. Albums first. Do you want to go ahead and try to just blindly guess each other's first number 1 spot?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think your number 1 is going to be 2.
Interesting. Okay. I think your number 1 is going to be 3.
Okay.
You've got a tattoo on your left bicep.
I do.
I don't know. That's just me going out on a limb there. But
how about guessing the least?
Okay.
I think you're going to put Presence as the least.
Okay. I think you're going to put... I think you might put Into the Outdoor as your least.
What could have given you that idea? Now, you start with your rankings. Go from your dustiest album to your spiciest album.
Will do. Dustiest, Crumpet. Album, Presence.
Oof.
Number 7.
Damn.
Debut, Led Zeppelin.
Whoa. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Stop the presses. Oh my God. If I post this ranking on the Zeppelin subreddit, we are screwed.
Fine, dude. We're rocking and rolling. Number 6, Zeppelin 3.
Whoa. Okay. Okay. Keep going.
5, In Through the Outdoor.
Okay. I was like, if it goes any further than 5 for In Through the Outdoor, oh my God.
4, Houses of the Holy. 3, 2. 2, Physical Graffiti. 1, Zeppelin 4.
What was your third?
3 was Zeppelin 2.
2, Physical Graffiti 4. I mean, the heavy hitters, all of them. That's, yeah. I love the cojones behind some of those picks.
I took it both literally for myself and then did what I didn't do in terms of how I approach tracks for our listens was like, where did these albums resonate with me historically through my life? And I love their debut album, man. It's again, we're talking about ranking Zeppelin here. So like people are going to look at these rankings and ultimately say that I'm shitting on Presence or shitting on the debut album. That's not the case. I'm not also virtue signaling and backing myself up or backtracking. I totally stand by these picks. It's the fact that historically for me, 4, Physical Graffiti, and 2 are ones that I most regularly listen to my entire life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I went through these, I was like, there is no putting that above this. There is no putting that above this. So as I broke it down, trust me, man, when I like sat here and stared over and over again at this, I'm like, holy fuck, this doesn't even look right. But it is what it is. So instead of trying to appease the listeners with my rankings, I'm fucking appeasing myself because these are my ranks.
Where'd you put Zeppelin 3?
3 is number 6. It's snug right between In Through the Outdoor and the debut.
You have In Through the Outdoor higher than 3.
Yeah, and dude, as hard as that was, it's such a fun, light album, and I think it has a lot to do probably with Fool in the Rain and but yeah, I mean,
hey man, hey, go with. I love it. Now you predicted that my Dustiest would be In Through the Outdoor. You were correct. Number 8. I just made a judgment call. I've been waffling on this, but I'm going to do it. Number 7, Houses of the Holy. Yep. Sorry, had to do it. I need to give it some shit because it's considered by some to be up there with their best. I don't think it is. Number 6, Presence. Is it 5 stars? No. I really love what that album is. Led Zeppelin 1 is my 5th. Number 4.
Not too far off there.
Not too far off. Do I keep this? Yeah.
Oh, you're keeping it. Over the line, Donnie.
All right. Number 4, Led Zeppelin 2. Number 3, Physical Graffiti. Number 2, Led Zeppelin 3. I love that album so much. But number 1, Led Zeppelin 4, all 8 tracks. There's not a weak one in the bunch. We got crap for our Dustiest Crumpet selections there. Well, something had to be the Dustiest Crumpet of 8. Doesn't mean it's bad. It is a true top to bottom. Wouldn't change a thing about it. So it was really hard for me to not give more love to Led Zeppelin 3 because I adore that album and it means a lot to me. But objectively speaking, Led Zeppelin 4 is them at the peak of everything they do best as a band. So I know it's kind of a boring pick. We each did it. Our Dustiest Crumpets are different. In Through the Outdoor for me, and you had Presence, but I understand that. Wow. Some diversity there.
I love the diversity, man. I think it's important, but also at the same time, like I said, it's as we move through these mini series with other bands, it's going to be more obvious that we don't align on things as wholeheartedly, and also go through something as hard as ranking Led Zeppelin. I mean, it's there needed to be stated and on record that there is no right or wrong here, and I think looking at after I did my rankings and after I've done record like each album's rankings, I'll usually go to Reddit and just take a look at what other people have placed. It's never swayed my rankings. It's never made me think about changing them, specifically this latest one with overall albums. But it's always interesting to see where other people put them. And I think the coolest thing, for the most part, Zeppelin fandom and the people that are vocal about it, not a lot of them align. I mean, it's like And I think that's probably sonically and the reason of where things resonate with you. But everybody seems to have different placements for what's most important to them and what's not. But 4 seems to be the froth at the top, if you will. So for the
Yep.
most.
I think it's fair. It is justifiably a classic. Now, before we award our spiciest of spicy biscuits, it is time to, if you want to call it an award, the dustiest of crumpets. Do you have your list handy, Ben?
I do. I do. I thought what I would do is I would go 1, 2, 3, 4. How's the holy physical graffiti presence and into the outdoor? I'm just going to list what I had.
Okay, I'll do that after you too.
Dustiest Crumpet. That way the listeners kind of understand, like, okay, I remember now what they are. We're not just blindly saying, here's my dustiest crumpet of all, because they were actually our dustiest crumpets, and they were actually our spiciest biscuits. Zeppelin 1, spiciest biscuit, how many more times? Dustiest crumpet, you shook me. Zeppelin 2, what is and what should never be? Dustiest crumpet, Moby Dick. Caught a lot of fucking shit for that one. Zeppelin 3, spiciest biscuit, Out on the Tiles. Dustiest crumpet, hats off to Roy Harper. Zeppelin 4, When the Levee Breaks, spiciest biscuit. Dustiest crumpet, 4 Sticks. Houses of the Holy, spiciest biscuit, The Rain Song. Dustiest crumpet, The Crunch.
Still spicy.
Still spicy. Physical graffiti, spicy biscuit, In the Light. Dustiest crumpet, Boogie with Stew. Presents, spiciest biscuit, For Your Life. Dustiest crumpet, Candy Store Rock. And finally, as we just discussed, In Through the Outdoor, spicy biscuit, Fool in the Rain. Dustiest crumpet, Hot Dog.
All right. So, start low. Your dustiest of crumpets.
Yep. It was a toss-up. It was between Hot Dog and Candy Store Rock. And it's funny that you brought that analogy up with the two of them. But ultimately it came down to Hot Dog as my overall catalog dustiest crumpets. Can you guess my top of the list catalog spiciest biscuit?
When the Levee Breaks.
Ding, ding, ding. Big star next to it. It was tough. You know, you're talking Out on the Tiles. How many more times? What is and what should never be? The Rain Song, In the Light. But, you know, I think when we got to In the Light, that was obviously one that I was passionate about. But, man, I go back to even just the lake trip a couple weeks ago, and that when the levee breaks, just banging on the boat as we're out in the water, and I'm thinking, like, there is no song. There's very few songs literally outside of the Zeppelin catalog that go as hard as that song. And so that, sir, is it for Yahtzee's picks.
Okay. My spiciest and dustiest. I will list first the dustiest and then spiciest from each album. So dustiest from 1 was I Can't Quit You, Baby, but my spiciest, like you, How Many More Times. From Led Zeppelin 2, my dustiest was Thank You. Just never hit. And my spiciest was Whole Lotta Love. From 3, dustiest was Hats Off to Roy Harper, though I still kind of appreciate it. Spiciest biscuit was Gallows Pole. From 4, dustiest was The Battle of Evermore, and my spiciest, When the Levee Breaks. From Houses of the Holy, dustiest was The Crunch, and my spiciest was No Quarter. From Physical Graffiti, my dustiest was Black Country Woman, and my spiciest was In My Time of Dying. Presents, dustiest, like you, Candy Store Rock. Spiciest was Nobody's Fault But Mine. And from In Through the Outdoor, my dustiest was Hot Dog, and my spiciest was Fool in the Rain. What do you predict will be my dustiest and my spiciest?
I think your dustiest is still going to be Hot Dog. Yeah, I think it's going to be Hot Dog. Now I'm conflicted on your spiciest because odds would say When the Levee Breaks also came in the top of the top for you, but for some reason, No Quarter is just jabbing me in my forehead. I'm going to say No Quarter.
Okay. Dustiest, I would be different if I could. It's Hot Dog. I thought a year or two ago I kind of liked that song, and then I listened to it 2 or 3 times the last couple weeks. And no. It's what a waste. And then Darlene, which it's not a great song necessarily, but like it's buried on Coda and no one gave a shit. So if Darlene is on their last actual studio album, ends the side well, I don't know what they were thinking track listing wise. I just don't. I cannot give Hot Dog undue love. It's just, and like here's the thing, hats off for Roy Harper. It's not pleasant to listen to, but there was a point and a purpose behind it. Candy Store Rock, no other choices. So, Hot Dog. All right, Spiciest. I've waffled between 2 songs. No Quarter was not one of them.
Wow, okay.
And they each start with W.
Well, what is and what should never be?
That was yours, but mine from Led Zeppelin 2 was Whole Lotta Love.
Oh, that's
and
right.
Mine from 4 was When the Levee Breaks. Those are the 2 I've been waffling against. And I was going to, for the sake of being different, go with Whole Lotta Love. But the fact of the matter is, as much as I love that song, and it is a 10 out of 10, When the Levee Breaks is a song that has rightly grown in stature because there is not a single other piece of recorded music that is like When the Levee Breaks. It is a summation of everything Zeppelin does well and what makes them so fucking good. It is timeless. And I could ship that to the moon or wherever, and someone 230, 300 years from now would listen to that and think, my God, what is this? And I know they do that with Whole Lotta Love. They do that with a bunch of Zeppelin songs, but there is an otherworldly quality to When the Levee Breaks that I still can't wrap my head around. I got to go with it. I know you and I are in complete agreement with that. That's okay. I was not going to be different for the sake of being different. It's When the Levee Breaks.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And I also think that how incredible it is that we go the distance here. We go the entire journey, and at the end of the day, undisputed, our Dustiest, Crumpet, and Spicy Biscuits are the same. And for listeners' sake, and folks following, this is the point. Like, we have not colluded in any capacity throughout this journey. I think Mike and I have appreciated the fact that as we come to these pods, we sort of think, man, maybe I'm going to get one up on him here, and we'll surprise each other. I think overall album rankings is that, but at the end of the day, we still both loved 4 at number 1, and there has to be something to that. And I would assume too, once this final episode is released and we get some feedback and some folks that play along on Reddit and the platforms that they'll do their own, then we'll probably see some similarities there. And the thing is, it's not really cutting down any one track, despite us really shitting on Hot Dog. But there are so many songs between Z and A being When the Levee Breaks, that interpretation here is really everything. But it's like you said, When the Levee Breaks is just so standalone in its stature, with the goal and the backbone and the oomph, the chutzpah, as you say, that, I mean, it was impossible to gravitate. And that's why I said, Mike, when I went through and I listed each album, and I put SB below it with DC, and then Zeppelin 2, SB, DC, and I listed them all out, there was no contest. I got down to 4, and I was like, oh, well, shit. I mean, I wish there was a competition here. I wish that I could look at this more holistically in way of, like, acting like I could put anything else up top. I just couldn't. So
yeah, no, I'm with you. That's it, man. I mean, we've spent 8 episodes talking about Led Zeppelin, and hopefully we did a decent enough job of covering a band that is in some ways uncoverable because there's just a wealth of material to go through. But we are going to be switching gears a couple weeks from now. Do we dare tell them who we're going to talk about?
I think at this point we're to the tail end of this, so if somebody picks it out, they pick it out. And I would hope at that point it means they're devoted listener at this point to us. So I'm happy to bestow it. Why not, Mike?
All right. In honor of their return to North America in the month of August, as they've begun their reunion tour 16 years after their last gigs together as a band, we're going to completely switch gears and decades and focus on the 7 studio albums of Oasis. Times out perfectly for you and I. Ben, you and I are going to see with a bunch of friends Oasis in Chicago on August 28th. And by that point, we will have had 3 episodes published. So definitely maybe. What's the Story, Morning Glory? Be Here, Here Now. Kind of their 3 classic albums, or the ones that are most remembered for sure from the 90s. And then after we go to that gig, I think we'll be primed and ready to start talking about their other output, which there's a lot of cool stuff on it. Oasis is something that's relatively new to me because I did not grow up with them as a fan. But in the last year, I've gotten into them, and I think this will make for an interesting series because I don't think either you or I have the institutional knowledge of the band like maybe Zeppelin. So I think there's a bit of a fresh perspective and lack of nostalgia and kind of objectivity that we can bring to it.
Yeah. And we kind of have someone in our pocket that I hope is going to be willing to spend some time with us on this pod. So for the first time too, we may be bringing, a guest host into the fold for at least an episode. I think it'll be huge. And the person I'm referring to is none other than Mr. Nathaniel Renstein, who is as big of an Oasis fan as anybody I've ever met. And I would put him up there with some of the biggest band music fans that I know. Mike, in terms of like your love for Zeppelin or your love for U2 or Rolling Stones, Nate is the same with his knowledge and his historic need for having Oasis in his life. I will refrain through that miniseries to constantly talk about where was the first time when you heard that song, because 9 times out of 10 it was probably in Nate's Honda Civic or at his house. But there are also personal essences of a lot of Oasis catalog that was self-provoked at a younger age when they were getting a ton of radio play and stuff too. So I think, like you said, it'll be fun to maneuver it because it will definitely not be as, I hate to use the word simple because Zeppelin was not simple, but it will not be as easy for us to pull things out as Zeppelin was.
No, for sure.
And I think that'll bode just perfectly with where we're heading, and then also coming off of the show at Soldier Field, it's going to give us something that we've not been given the opportunity of here, which is to talk about seeing some of or all of the tracks that we will ultimately hear live, and add our spin on how that adds to our ranking systems and how we hear things from the album, because we will have just been coming off of hearing those tracks live, which will be pretty powerful.
Which you have no knowledge because you're not following the set list. I have, so I'll try as we do those episodes before we go to that gig to not divulge. Oh yeah, so I mean this one right here, man. When they play it live on the Live 25 tour, it's I won't say anything like that, but yeah, it'll be a cool divergence, and we will bounce between decades and types of rock. We're not going to be stuck in just one sort of subgenre. I know Oasis is sonically not really anything to do with Zeppelin. And the band that we pick after Oasis will probably not sonically have much to do with Zeppelin or Oasis. So we'll try to keep things not just interesting for us, but interesting for those that are following along at home. So But that wraps it up, man.
What an amazing journey, man. That was awesome. It's pretty cool. I was talking to friends over the weekend while we were at Dave, and then yesterday, Tattoo Dan and stuff, just talking about kind of what we've done here and how, you had the thought to kind of infiltrate the band's subreddits just to kind of release kind of what we're doing and give the opportunity from a perspective of what these people have been doing. Because when we have done this now, I look back on Reddit, and this is kind of a thing. Like people, they don't rank the way we're doing with like their favorite track and stuff, but they will rank tracks from top to bottom. So sure. I guess people have been doing organic, Dustiest Crumpets and Spiciest Biscuits. Things of that nature. But the cool part about it for me is the interaction that we've been gaining from just being kind of ingrained in that subreddit. So as we, go along here, obviously we'll kind of be bidding our Zeppelin subreddit adieu, and moving on to the Oasis one. But like you said, I think that as we move along here, we're sort of being intentional with who we're picking. But as we start to get some miles underneath our belt, I think we'll kind of branch out and get, a little bit off the record in terms of, who we're shooting for, because, the idea here really is to come at this from a fresh perspective, a fresh listen, dig out some nostalgia, but also just come at it from a, purely non-biased aspect, which, as much as I tried to do with Zeppelin, it was hard at times. It was easy at other times. But just a fun way to look forward to weeks, man, with you, and cap off certain midweek nights with just a little podcasting and good banter. So
I know the Supertramp subreddit is chomping at the bit. All 543 of them. The Oasis one, man, they're rocking and rolling right now, for obvious reasons. So by the time we get this rolling, I think that the European leg or the British leg will be done, and we'll be unveiling, definitely maybe, here in a couple weeks, which is, Led Zeppelin 1. It changed things. Definitely maybe not as much in North America, but in England, what that record did and what it meant to that culture and music fans over there is really hard to overstate.
Yeah. I guess pressure is probably the perfect word. I think that, we've been given the opportunity to come at this from exactly what it is with Zeppelin, but with Oasis, we're going to kind of be right there on the spot. I also think, though, track-by-track breakdowns, overall album breakdowns and stuff are kind of just organically going to go a little bit quicker than what we have within Zeppelin, despite the fact that a lot of their albums are much longer than, what Zeppelin...
Oh, my God. Where we get to be here now, this 76-minute... I mean, this is the CD age, when you had 80 minutes, so you could use it if you wanted to.
Yeah, and I think... but I also think, it won't be as... I don't think every track is going to have a story that goes hand in hand with it. So I think organically that'll be sort of the name of the game. I don't want to pretend like I'm going to know the exact foundation of how we're going to roll with Oasis, but I do know that nostalgic takeaways of each of their at least first 4 albums for me are going to be fun to talk about. And it really doesn't even have to do anything with like the track by track breakdown. So I think it's going to be a totally different perspective than how we came at it with Led Zeppelin, but for the essence of this and not jumping ahead to talk anything about Oasis at this moment, Zeppelin's been a pleasure, man. I've stated it as we've maneuvered this, that taking the time to go from track 1 through the last track, taking note of what was on side A and what was on side B, if you don't have the opportunity to actually have a physical vinyl handy, is just such a cool exercise, and I would implore anybody to do it, even if you're not looking to do the Dustiest, Crumpets, and Spiciest Biscuits, because there was a rhyme, there was a reason behind why bands produced albums and did the track layouts and the things that they did with very intentional album covers and thought-provoking additions to the way that you're to receive the whole package, no pun intended. So if you do that in this age of streaming music and tennis balls, I refer to it, like, throw the ball, the dog is going to gravitate towards the tennis ball, and now you completely forgot what you were doing 2 seconds ago. To slow down for 42 minutes like we did with In Through the Outdoor and just take it all in for what it is. Whether you do it often or you don't do it at all, it's just so therapeutic to let yourself feel what the band wanted you to feel like. And even if you're not a Zeppelin fan, it is such a pleasurable journey to do that with really any band, I think. And there's, again, a reason behind the madness of why they lay these things out and why they do it the way they do. So that's my spiel. On a personal note, man, again, like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure and a blast to rock and roll this specific miniseries with you from top to bottom, and I am looking forward to this being simply the tip of the Zeppelin, if you will.
Absolutely. So. We did the big one to start, so I think it's going to just in some ways get easier from here. It's like starting with the Beatles, and maybe we'll do the Beatles someday. I'm sure we will. And the Stones, we'll have to maybe pick, instead of all 30 of their albums, like 6 to focus on. And but as we go along, though, Oasis next. After that, who knows? But sadly, we will have to say that for the last time, this is Drop the Needleheads, and you've been listening to The Pod Remains the Cast. You've been doing the outros recently. Are you prepared to do so?
Yeah, man, of course.
Drop the needleheads with Schmiggy.
Me?
And, we'll,
Oh, sorry. Yeah. We'll do that little cheesy shit.
all right, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Drop the needleheads with Schmiggy.
That's me.
Yahtzee, that's me. The record spin, the bourbon flows. And the breakdowns, in this case, are deeper than the inside of John Bonham's bass drum.
It's been a good time. See you in 2 weeks, everybody.
Cheerio, and looking forward to this next one. Thanks for listening, and we will see you real soon.
It's Drop the Needlehead.